Hello, beautiful souls. Today's episode is so good. And before we jump in, I have some exciting news to share. If you've ever wondered where you're blocking money, this is for you. I've created a free quiz to diagnose your money wounds so you can heal them and unblock yourself to receive more money. Just go to moneywoundsquiz.com and answer 6 quick questions to get your insanely accurate and potent results. And if you're loving my vibe and want to work one-on-one to call in more feminine energy wealth, I would love to hear from you. You can shoot me a DM on social media or go to emilywilcox.com to learn more.
Hello and welcome back to the M Makes Money Show. I'm so happy to be here today, joined by Leah Fisch, founder of CEO Rise. She teaches high-performance habits and business building to neurodiverse employees, students, and business owners. She's passionate about helping people access mental health, build confidence, and create phenomenal productivity and organization habits that work best for their nervous systems. Leah believes that supporting people of backgrounds, races, sexes, and ages to tap into and sustain the expression of their passions and skills is the most effective choice any organization can make. It decreases waste, increases the triple bottom line, and creates unparalleled work and home environments to truly make the world a better place. Leah, welcome to the show.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Emily.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here as well. So I really love your mission, and I think it's so interesting, the work that you do. And I know that you work with a lot of organizations as well, not just individuals. So I'm so curious, how did you get into this work?
So I don't yet work with a lot of organizations. It's where I'm moving my work to work with universities and companies. I have some people on my roster that's starting to happen. I used to do it in the past, and there was kind of a break, and now I'm doing it again, but in a kind of different, more streamlined way. So I got into this work from doing many years of personal organizing, and that had me working in people's offices, but it was like I'd be called in to work with a person in particular or something like that. And I would always see that a lot of the issues were much more on a systemic level, whether it was organizing, productivity, but also things like, morale. And that wasn't something I ever really had any kind of, training in or anything. But as I work with individuals, I would see, so it was something that kind of became a seed in my mind that I really wanted to do a long time ago. And then over the years, that's something that I've never really had the courage to go for full force. But now at this point in my business, I'm really openly going for it. I'm going to be presenting to a university. They've hired me to talk to their staff about productivity and mental health. And as well as one of my clients, who is an executive coach in Seattle, is bringing me to work with a couple of the companies that she works with. So now that I've admitted it and I'm going for full force, it's really starting to happen.
I love that. You're speaking it into existence.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you find sort of archetypes of people in your work, that they need a different type of support and structure and they're almost buckets, or do you find it more highly individualized?
I actually went just for the fun of it to get a master's in demography because like many, manifesting generators, I see patterns everywhere, or neurodivergent people, seeing patterns everywhere. Right. And so many coaches over the years said, oh, you should do a quiz. What's your organizing style? And I was like, would I be putting on the quiz? Do you let food rot in the fridge and then throw it out? What kinds of things am I putting on? And, so I think I don't use any kind of archetypal system. I think definitely people have similar things, and certainly people with, for example, ADD, one of my specialties, ADHD, have a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of people that I've worked with who have, for example, PTSD, who have the exact same behaviors. And I've worked with neurotypical people who don't have any of these diagnoses and they do the exact same thing. So I find it's more just like there's a gamut of things that people can do. And, when we can kind of pull out of the nomenclature, I think it's helpful to understand like it's all just normal on a range.
Mm-hmm. And what about, do you leverage any human design stuff in your work? Because I know that's kind of a hot topic around like projectors versus generators. No.
I don't know. I've only really been introduced to it since we met in our mutual community. I really don't know about it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just always so curious, about other people's work, and I'd love to hear from you how you define productivity.
So productivity to me is the ability to do the things you need to do so you can live the life you want. That's pretty much it. And actually I'm in a new mastermind that's primarily men, and I mean like 98% men. and one of the men on the call, one of the members said, and the leaders and the coaches, it's all men. So one of the people asked a question. He said, my wife is struggling with, mom guilt, of feeling guilty for going back to work, whatever. Do you have anything to say about that? And the head of the mastermind, Sam, said, it was like, first he said, how do you handle that? And he said that his wife was basically at home and he works 12 hours a day and that's it. So he said, well, what do you recommend? And he said, I don't know. You'd have to speak to like someone who knows about this, like a mother who's an entrepreneur. So I messaged the guy and I said, I'm happy to talk to your wife. So I had a call with her actually today before this interview. And, what I was saying to her is that, humans are by nature, productive. And a lot of the things that get in our way, and this is something I'm always talking about, animals are productive.
Right.
I have a brand new YouTube channel coming out. And this is the thing I'm talking about in the video. Like, it's such a myth to think about productivity as getting up at 4 a.m. Like, that is just absurd. If you want to do that, go ahead. But people have this concept that productivity is something outside of yourself, that, if you were someone else, you could be more productive. If you were really productive, you would do this. Well, how about you're productive when you are living in a way that you feel whole and complete, and your mental health is doing well, and your body is healthy, and you do what you need to do, and you don't stress out about all the undone tasks. You have a competent and effective way of dealing with things, whether it's yourself or you're delegating to a team. You master the art of being caught up, as I like to say, so that life is available. You can be in the present moment. It's, as I'm constantly saying to my clients, even though we focus on the to-dos, not in my coaching, but in Productivity Lab, my signature program, we're focusing on doing, but we're doing it not for the sake of like, how many things can you cross off your list so you can say, oh, I crossed off 6 things on my list, but rather to be like, I am free. I am free to live my life, to be with my children, to walk in nature, to whatever, ride a bike, have a drink, like whatever your thing is, I'm free to do that. And I'm not secretly not enjoying this because taxes are due in 2 weeks. I have no idea what I owe, and I have a year of tracking to catch up on.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. So you said that you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, like as early as age 5. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, my first business is when I was 5 years old. I remember it vividly, the orange shag carpet in our house. And I instructed my mother to buy me an 8-pack of Trident gum and a 5-pack of Velements. I don't even know if these things exist anymore because I don't use those things. But so she bought them. I opened them all up in a paper bag, which I will give my 5-year-old a pass because there's a reason they're in their separate things, to keep the flavor separate. But anyway, and there's, germs, but whatever. Wasn't concerned with that at the time. And I thought it'd be fun, like a grab bag, And so I wrote on the bag, gum 5 cents, mints 3 cents. And I have three older sisters. My older youngest sister, so who's 7.5 years older than me, observed me doing this. And she said to me, like, who do you think is going to buy this? And I was like, mommy, at least, I was like, mommy. And she was like, mommy is not going to buy it. She's already bought this stuff for you. And I remember saying to her, 5 years old, and I was like, oh, really? Well, she's my best customer. And, even at 5 years old, I was being naysayed for my entrepreneurial vision, by the people closest to me, my only sister who was like really in the house around me. And that's so, it just kind of like says it all right there. Like I believed I already had customers. My own family doubted me. God bless my sister. We just don't think the same, and we still don't. And I had the same exact thing happen in 2008, September 2008. Little did I know what was to come. I launched my dream business called Recycle the City in Manhattan. And when I finally started telling people about it, everyone was like, hand on hip, finger wag, like, no one's going to pay you that. And I was like, really? That's so weird, because they already are. So not because I want to be, obstinate or confrontational or whatever, but that's really the thing of being an entrepreneur, is that people, and this is something in the last couple of years I've done a lot of work on, is like, they don't mean harm. They really they don't know what you're talking. Like that truly does not make any sense to them, because they wouldn't pay for it. Yeah. You know what? That's okay. That's totally okay. And actually inside of that is so much of the reason we're creating those things as entrepreneurs, is precisely because they wouldn't pay for that. And that's the thing that needs to be paid for.
Yeah. And, when people say something like that, I think they genuinely actually think that they're being helpful, like they're giving feedback. But most of those people are not entrepreneurs. And so they have no idea how that lands in our nervous system. And so I think you bring up something important, because there's a time and a place to like activate the throat chakra and just speak it into existence and tell everyone what you're doing or your dream. And there's a time when you keep it a little closer to the chest, and it's like a little seedling and it needs more protection. Mm-hmm. And both of those things are fine. I think sometimes entrepreneurs get it twisted and they feel like, if I really believed in this, why am I not telling more people? And I'm like, well, who are you afraid to tell? Oh, well, my dad, who never approved of anything I ever did. Okay. So maybe that's actually a really self-honoring instinct, not because you don't believe in your dream, but actually because you believe in it so much that you're just not willing to accept anything that could feel negative right now.
Yeah. And, actually at that time in 2008, I was listening to a lot, like 2007 and 2008, I was listening to Wayne Dyer a lot. And he had actually said, when you're starting something, keep it close. Don't tell anyone about it. He said, I know it. He said, I know you want to tell your partner, your child, your best friend. He was like, don't tell anyone. And I didn't. And the energy that was held in Recycle the City, of course, there was a huge, crash economically, and it actually didn't even affect me. That was a crazy thing. What I had to shut down because I was betrayed by the person I hired to work with me that I had known from high school, but that's a whole other story. But it actually, I think the energy of holding that, keeping it close, which was very hard because I'm very close with my family, despite their criticisms and trying to warn me and all that, I still am very open with them. But I remember telling them at a meal, and I said, I've started a new business called Recycle the City. And they just all, stared at me. And then I was like, kind of waiting for, the criticism. And then like, a minute later, we're like nosy, bossy Jews from New Jersey, and they were all like, yeah, that doesn't make no one's going to, no. But because I had, I think, like you say, nurtured that seedling, it actually was doing awesome and it was great. And I think it could have been really great, but I left, and I always think maybe I'll return to it. But anyway, other companies, kind of had that model, took that model, et cetera. And I realized there were other ways for me to work besides like doing it all for people.
Was that your first like entrepreneurial success? Or had you done other things prior?
No. So I started doing professional organizing when I was in 2002, in January of 2002. So, and that became my business, Leah Fisch Reorganizer. And I hated the name, but I worked with marketing team and a business coach. And, they were like, it's got to be you. I mean, you are the business. And this is something I've actually struggled with forever. I just was having the same conversation with the coach last week. I was like, I don't want it to be me. And then he was like, people follow people. They don't want, organizations or, he's like, maybe people follow Nike, but like people are interested in people, not Nike. It's even if it's Nike, it's the people they're spotlighting kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a business 2007 that I formally created called Leah Fisch Reorganizer. And that was me, doing the personal organizing work. And that was how I came to be on the show Hoarding Buried Alive as a professional organizer. Learned some really hard lessons there about what, people promise the world. And everyone tells you it's an incredible opportunity, do anything once in a lifetime. And that was a time in my life where I had a very strong body response that it wasn't right. And I didn't want to do what they asked, but I, steamrolled and did it anyway, because again, everyone wanted to help and everyone was saying, do this, do this, do this. And, ultimately it's not helpful to regret things, but I learned that, people don't always deliver what they promise. And second of all, steamrolling yourself is not a good idea, especially when you have a strong body response about something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have so many of those moments too. My husband and I talk about them and it's like, well, if we're being totally honest, like even if we could go back in time, I don't think we'd change it because it's like even making the wrong decision moves you forward as long as you don't quit, and it's like we learned so many valuable lessons.
Totally. And, having my business and having that betrayal that happened with Recyclicity and, I signed a contract that she wrote. I really thought we were being smart. And I like the term managing director. Like I was like, ooh, I'm a grown up. I'm going to, and that I had to go to court. It was a whole thing. And guess what? I learned a passion about writing contracts and working with lawyers. And lawyers always ask me if I'm a lawyer. Or they tell me I should become one. But because I learned the hard way, the school of hard knocks is a very valuable school.
Yeah, it is. And it's painful. I'm sorry you went through that.
Oh, it is.
We've had some wild things too. Like, I feel like you and I could probably just do an episode on like crazy, wild nightmare business stories. Cause we had this, mainly my husband, but it's like what's mine is yours kind of a thing, had this business partner who was like a total genius and, really should have, $100 million company right now just because he was so smart, but he also was a little bit of a crook. And so although like everything could have been great and on the up and up, it just like, unfortunately was not the way that he could operate. And so, we just experienced the most wild things where it was like, while he was on a flight, like over international waters, he like held a board meeting with just himself and like changed all the equity agreements and like screwed us and like other people out of things.
What?
And then it's like, we're showing lawyers and they're like, they're like, it's questionable, but actually like, because it is over international waters, it would be difficult to say what the jurisdiction is. And like,
whoa,
you're like, who are these people that know these like crazy loopholes to just screw people out of things,
Yeah, I mean, it's, and that's something, and being a, New York Jew kind of a thing. I think people have this perception that I'm like tough and cynical. I'm actually extremely, I mean, I've learned, but I've always been like a very gullible, take you at your word. Like people are always like, well, he could be lying. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. Really? You think so?
Yeah, me too. I'm like, wait, that's a possibility?
Exactly. And so, yeah, with this, I mean, similar, not to that crookish degree, but the person who worked for me was freaking fantastic at the job. She was so excellent. And a lot of the success came because of what she did, 100%, and she, would say like, gosh, I don't know why the court is saying that. Like I had told them to stop. And then when we went to court, it was like all of the things that she submitted, which were not telling them to stop and, suing me for, employee compensation and all this stuff. So workman's comp, I mean, and unemployment, she was not an employee, but then they ruled that she was. And so I learned all about the laws of how New York rules if someone is not an employee, even though I had signed this 1099 agreement with her that she had written. So yeah, live and learn, man,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like, we both play in this like coaching realm but also have had these other experiences. And I do think that this is an area where the coaching business is still so young. Like a lot of people sort of start as solopreneurs and then maybe they're hiring their first person, but maybe that they are just doing 1099s. And like, it does have a little bit of like the kind of fly by the seat of your pants sort of a feel to it. And I sort of love that about the coaching industry. And then also I see from, running an agency and having run an e-commerce brand and just having, been around enough entrepreneurs that have stories like your story and my story, that it's like, oh yeah. And also button up your agreements and also pay attention to the law. And also don't assume that you're small enough that you're just going to fly under the radar and nobody is going to notice this thing.
Yes. And I also see some entrepreneurs like letting that stuff go also. Like it's very surprising to me that one of my clients, we hired a website designer who came through a referral of a private client of mine. So she, we all kind of know each other. And so I hadn't worked with this designer before. And my client was having me look through like her proposal and and there were some questions. And then she said, we'll agree. And I said, I'm not really clear because she mentioned the graphic designer's code of ethics or something like that she used for pricing and whatever. And then she said something and I said, it says here. And she was like, oh, I don't use contracts anymore. Like, I don't see a point in them and I don't need them. And I like, really had to pick my jaw off the floor. But I was like, wow, that's very interesting. Like you don't, like you can do that, like there. Yeah. So we say like, well, live and learn, button up your agreements, which I absolutely do. I have a meeting with my lawyer every year to go over any needed changes. And if I need it more than once a year, I do that, and we just review, and I just love it, to be totally honest. But we review any other things, change verbiage. As the online world changes, there's new rules that need to be covered. So she'll look at, a very common thing for anyone listening that is, I see this happening very frequently for people who I don't use ClickFunnels, but I use Keep. Don't recommend it, but anyway, Keep/Infusionsoft for my CRM, content resource management program. And it now is the law for online purchases that you have to have, that they can click to read, that they have read the terms and conditions. And I've seen well-established business coaches that I know, a business coach and another relationship coach, where the programs to buy did not have, they were using the product, not the order form. So there was no way to read the terms and conditions before purchasing, which is actually illegal. But it's like the law is trying to catch up with this blooming industry.
Yeah.
And so it's not even really, well, I know and actually a couple years ago, I did a program and I had done it that way. And one of the people in my world close to me is actually formerly a lawyer, and she had done a post like, I wonder but it wasn't the law yet back then. And now it has become the law. So it's just really interesting how these things kind of develop hand in hand, that the law is coming to meet, to rise up to meet what's actually happening in the industry.
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, and just one more thing. Sorry, just while you're
go ahead.
One more thing that you said earlier is you said a lot of the people who criticize or they're trying to help or whatever, they're not entrepreneurs themselves. And we both know lots of people, ourselves included, I would bet you, I can't speak for you, but I can bet, of ways that we've been naysayed by our own coaches. I had a big vision, and he pretty much shut that down. And I had what I wanted to charge, shut that down. And it's taken me a long time to overcome. And I share that, School of Hard Knocks is good because it also gives you things that you can understand, first of all, how not to be, what to do in that situation. And obviously as a mentor, you can, what you went through and what you learned, and you can teach that to other people. But it's one thing if someone isn't an entrepreneur, they mean well, they don't know, they don't get it. But when someone is and they still don't get it, do they mean well? Maybe they do mean well, but what's up with that,
Yeah, totally. I know, it's interesting. I was just scanning my brain, have I had that happen to me? What's so interesting is and probably people listening to this will laugh given the topic of the podcast, but I was so disempowered in my money story for ever, that I feel like my coaches and people in my life were always sort of advocating on my behalf and sort of cheerleading me. I think they could just see how talented I was, or how much I had to offer, or how much my company was doing. And I wasn't charging enough, or really owning that enough. Even back in corporate, my first real big corporate job, all of the hiring was done by the HR team, because they were doing this big reorg and they didn't know who the managers were going to be yet. So I met my manager after I got hired. And when she found out what they offered me, she was so mad. She's like, you should be getting paid so much more. This is crazy. She's like, I am going to work on getting you a raise. And I was like, oh, really? I was so happy with what I had been offered. So anyway, it's really just funny, the varied experiences that we've had. And I have heard so many people talk about how their coaches have, unnecessarily put a ceiling on them and what they're capable of. And
so are you saying that, in that example, the manager was kind of going to the bat for you? So is it saying just that whether it's naysaying us or going to the bat for us, there's this concept that other people know better than we're aware of? Or is that what you're saying?
I just was saying I never had the experience of me saying this is my big dream and here's how much I want to charge, and people being no, you can't do that. I was on the other side of it, so disempowered, I'll just take the scraps. I'm so good with whatever. And so then my coaches and the people above me were actually rise the F up, woman.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Now I understand.
Yeah. However, I think your point is really valid too, right? That whenever we're looking outside of ourselves, whether it's for permission, permission to do it, or that it's okay or whatever, it's not the most empowered perspective anyhow. And that's something I'm really aware of as a coach too, not allowing my clients to sort of override their inner authority and to go with what I'm saying, no matter what it is. Even if my vision for them is bigger, or I would charge a different price, that actually doesn't matter at all. It's really bringing people home to their own sovereignty and their inner authority.
100%. And that was something I was saying to this mother today that I spoke to. She was telling a story that she put her toddler in school, and he would cry every day. And felt terrible in her body, and she was referencing God a lot. And she said, about what God is teaching her and wanted for her. And I said, well, whether you want to call it God or your higher self or whatever, the point is your body was telling you that something was off. And she said, when she finally took him out again, they tried for months, and he was just, and at 4 years old. And she said, they finally made the decision to take him out of school. And she said, her entire body just, felt so much better. She felt this, she was like, God gave me peace. And, it's like, however you want to view where this is coming from, like your body had a strong answer for you. And we're truly not trained to listen or observe or anything like that. When, we don't always have all the answers, right? People eat poisonous berries. Like we don't know everything, right. But we know a lot more than we know, than we think we know. And when we can really start to hone in and train ourselves to listen and to be aware of that, so many things happen. First of all, from a productivity standpoint, I was just talking to my client about this before our session here, our interview, which is that, so much of the waste in terms of, time, energy, emotions, money, whatever you want, so much of the waste that occurs is straight up from people not listening to themselves. Humans, we are sensate beings. Like when we don't listen to ourselves, and again, it's not that we know everything, but it's like, I have observed people for thousands and thousands of hours over the years with their to-do lists. I'm well into the, expert according to Malcolm Gladwell. And, you will see people back when I worked with people live and over the year. I actually went online in 2014. So this whole, thing I've been in this world for a long time. But you see people like and I even have this thing, most people are right-handed in the United States. And so people will they'll turn to the right. So they'll put their left side and turn away from the thing. So you'll literally be observing someone going through their tasks and they'll turn to the right when they don't want to do it.
Interesting.
And so, but it's literally like this turn away of the thing. And I learned this because I had a client for many, many years who had a lot of emotional difficulties, let's say. And when people would ask her things that she didn't want to answer, she would always turn to the right. And I would observe her body language. I was like, what is this? And then I noticed, even working with people online, they'll they say like, if you look one side, you're lying, the other side, I can never remember. But I noticed that people would literally turn away from it. It's like our bodies are speaking loudly, And when we can start to allow that to be the thing rather than trying to constantly override ourselves, I talk about building your productivity inside of your clutter, inside of your emotions. I talk about Gestalt Productivity, which is a term from psychology, meaning, I just am meaning all parts of yourself, but I call it, the inner synergy, that when you include your emotions rather than the very common concepts in productivity literature still to this day, which are to override your emotions. Yeah. It's physically absurd because the limbic brain, the emotion brain, is stronger than your prefrontal cerebral cortex, which is really what you need for productivity, decision making, feel good hormones, motivation, creativity. Like that's right. So if that's being overridden by negative emotions, by fear, by anxiety, by doubt, like it's a mess. And if we can actually just flip that switch and say, like, like you're saying, inner authority, like saying, well, what do you think? How do you feel about that? Yeah. Wow. It's like people all of a sudden are like, I don't want to do that. It's like, okay.
Yeah, totally. Like I really changed my productivity system a couple years ago to be more in alignment with this. And it's so much better. Like I sort of write out what I would like to do for the week, but I don't assign it to a specific day because it's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to want to do on Tuesday. So if I just have this little bucket that I can pick from, and then I have these spaces, then I just feel into it. And it's like, it's so easy. I have a sacral authority in human design. It's like, okay, perfect. Let's do that one.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is I was just talking to my client today about that. I have a system I created called the Grand To Do. And the whole idea of it is that, like we were talking about earlier, it's not to do these tasks, that's what your life is about. It's like you're able to have that, let's say, luxury that so many people don't have of picking from your bucket, because I'm guessing you're caught up, and what happens is when people aren't caught up, they're constantly, behind the eight ball. And so they don't have that luxury. It's like, I have to do all the tracking for my taxes and take my whatever and get a root canal. It's like,
that sounds terrible. I'm so glad that's not my to-do list.
but it's like, and even if there's no literal root canal, everything feels like, so it's like, so I don't know. I've only heard about horrible things about root canals from my mother. May I never know. But the idea that things take on these other, and all of that compounds, it gets worse and worse even before the thing has actually even been dealt with, so there is so much of like a, rewiring in terms of how you go about things, how you think about them, but really foundationally, how much you're willing to listen to what you already do know.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Let's talk about money.
Okay. Let's.
I don't want to run out of time and not talk about one of our favorite topics here.
Okay.
So, well, why don't we just start with what you're making now? And then you can talk me through like any limiting beliefs that had to change in order for you to kind of embody where you're at right now.
So what I'm making in terms of products or money?
Money.
So yes. So this year, I was just doing the numbers last night in preparation for this show, actually, to see like what are the actual sales. So for sales this year, I'm actually the highest I've ever been, which is
Yay.
Wonderful, right?
Congrats.
Thank you. So it looks like not including, so it's June 17th. And as of right now, and I'm at about 530,000 US dollars in sales. Nice. So that feels awesome.
Yeah.
And I know that there is like, somewhere between 50 and 100 that I can like pretty much count on, right? Of people who are going to renew Productivity Lab and that kind of thing. But I have it in my mind, that thing of like, they say the first million is the hardest. I should ask you, but I would love to be able to like, just, I've never even crossed 500,000. Last year was my biggest year at 405 gross, and take home, that was, I think it was 289 profit, net.
Yeah.
And so that was my highest year. The year before that was 249 gross. And I don't remember, probably, so I was hovering back other years. It was not nearly in the 70s of, of net, that kind of profit margin.
Yeah.
But like 2019, I had a child, and my gross was under 100,000. And before that, the highest it had ever been was around 100,000 gross. And I was, paying about 50, about half of that really was. So, and that's the cool thing I think about money. And it's so, it's just so consistent that the more you have, because the margin, if I'm spending $100,000 a year in expenses and I'm only making 125, well, I'm broke. But if I'm still spending about 100,000 in expenses and I'm making double that, well, gosh, like now I have 100. Well, I'm making triple. Well, gosh, now there's going to be, some things are going to start to change. I've given my assistant a couple of raises this year. In the last 12 months, I give him bonuses, and I've raised what my instructor, sharing the wealth, right? I don't do profit sharing, but doing, definitely sharing the wealth. Those things increase, and then making changes. So I'm going to be bringing my community over to a new community that one of my coaches created. So that's going to have an additional fee that I haven't been paying, right? So things do change, but if, a lot of also what happens is that we're also often paying to make up for things that we haven't done. We're also paying for things that we're just completely not aware of that we're paying for, because we don't even know the logins to our credit card. So we're just paying stuff that we have no concept of. And so, yesterday I was on a call with a private client and his team, and they were talking about, and I could just, wow, it was from, 3,000 miles away. They're in California, I'm in New Jersey. And the limiting beliefs of one of the people on his team was so glaring, and she said, you have to set it up for below $20 each month. They'll pay it. They won't even remember. And I was thinking, like, do you want people who don't remember that they're paying for your product? She's like, got to get the high volume, and then people won't even notice it. I was like, but you don't want people who don't notice it. You want people who are engaged and buying. Right. They want to be buying, so it's I forget exactly where I was going with that, but something about, but like when you start to clean all those things up of where you're unconscious or, you don't know how to do it better or whatever, that's really where I see like the finessing of the profit margins.
Yeah. Well, your business has grown quite a bit, like year over year. I mean, like what a cool growth trajectory. I'm curious what percentage, well, actually, I don't even want to get that specific. What part of that growth do you feel like was strategy versus energetics? Like what were some of the mindset or energy shifts that you made versus was it just the compound effect or raising your prices?
It was definitely raising my prices in some things. It was definitely raising my prices. So I charge $15,000 a month for private coaching. And I currently have people paying that, right? So that's one thing. And and that was something that years ago I said, I want to charge it in 2020. I said, I want to charge $10K a month. I was charging $5. And I said, and it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I feel like I want to charge 30, it seems to go in doubles. It doesn't, it's not like I'm like, well, let me add, 35%, it's not, I'm just like, I think I want to double it, Yeah. And so strategically, do I have, the people to pay that? No, I think it kind of like works the other way around, that when I'm ready to charge 15K, that person will appear, kind of a thing. So definitely raising my prices. It's funny, this year, my business has completely, I had, as you said earlier, spoken it into existence that next year in 2023, my business would be completely different because I plan to be doing trainings and having trainers work in universities and corporations to offer productivity lab and coaching and that kind of thing. And so I don't really plan to be working with actually entrepreneurs nearly as much, and the public and that kind of thing. So what's funny is that I launched a lot of similar programs, same or similar, that I have launched, the last couple of years. And they didn't really, I didn't really have, something where last year I did it twice and I sold 86. This year I sold 12, I wasn't remotely things where I've sold, 20 to 30 or 10 to 30 or whatever. I was sold 2, So it was like, I spoke it and then it already started happening. And then I was like, oh my gosh, but yet I'm making more that, that was my highest quarter. It was my second, highest second quarter. So it's a lot of it is just like trusting. I mean, it sounds so trite, but honestly, trusting. My husband is a Sagittarius, I'm a Capricorn. And he's Colombian. So he's so good at having faith. And I am, this like Jew who's over here, like nervously counting my, Excel spreadsheet or whatever. But, really believing like, look, this is what I charge and the right people are going to show up and guess what? They are. So, but it really does rely on deep, talk about foundational in the body, while dealing with a lot of, physical things helps, as someone who's struggled much of my life with anxiety and depression, that really can interfere, even though I was able to charge and able to work and all of that. But getting to new places physically within yourself allows your brain, again, to, cut down a lot of that chatter. And I really do believe that self-trust and self-esteem are really the best ways to build a business.
Yes. Amen. And I love what you were saying, because to me, this is the blend of strategy and energetics, right? Like, so you had to actually raise your prices and sort of tell people, right? Like there is the masculine energy of just doing the damn thing and creating some of the money channels for people to pay you. But then there's the feminine energy of like believing that the people are there and like trusting that if it feels right in your body, that it is the right thing, and just in moving without having the evidence yet. And having that marriage of the two is such a beautiful thing in a business.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree that the pricing is a masculine thing. I mean, I know you're saying do the damn thing. Like I think it's actually, I think pricing is actually, unless you're being like super strategic and analyzing your demographic and that kind of thing. And like, what do people pay? And whenever people are, kind of go there, I'm always like, okay, well, and they also do all kinds of other things. So how about, I do have a degree in demography, but how about we just leave all that, and like what feels right to you? And so, yes, creating obviously the physical thing where they can click to pay, I guess you could say it's masculine, but I don't find it, to me, the masculine, like container of it is, I actually see the masculine more as the faith part, given what I just shared with you, that the masculine is the faith that holds me to just like swirl around and say like, I think I'll charge $15,000 a month,
Yeah, I see your perspective. I really view the masculine as like the structure. And so that's what I mean about like actually setting the price and giving people a tangible way, right, for money to come in, versus just sort of saying it and then like trusting and surrendering. To me, then there's like the physical component of it as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course.
So, well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know, I think that, people listening are going to want to follow along with your journey. And I would love for you to share the places that you hang out online so that people can, connect with you directly as well.
Yes, thank you. I'd love to. Basically, my name is Leah Fisch, Leah, last name Fisch, Fisch. And I am on Facebook, and I just am basically next week starting my YouTube channel. Which will be Leah Fisch. My website is ceorise.com. And at some point we'll have something open to the public there. Right now it's only for members to log into there. Because when you keep getting more, it's funny, sometimes you like I always say clarity reveals herself over time when shown interest, respect, and attention, and most of all patience, and so that's what I've been really applying to my own business, is just allowing clarity to reveal herself. But when it comes to something, speaking of masculine, I find like a website is a very masculine thing. It's like, the site map and the goals and the, even the visual, but it has to be very, it's so strategic. It's exhausting. And I spent 1.5 years making a website, and I just cut the whole thing down. And I'm like, I'm going to wait for clarity to reveal herself, of how this is supposed to look. So anyway, perhaps someone listening to this in a year, I may have one, I don't know, but ceorise.com is my website. And
just go buy something from Leah, and then you can log in on CEO Rise to access it.
Exactly. Yeah. And any questions, they can email me at leah@ceorise.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing all of your wisdom with us, Leah. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. Before you go, I have something fun to share. Now, when you leave a review of the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, take a quick screenshot and send it to hi@emilywilcox.com. You'll be entered into a drawing to win a free one-on-one Voxer coaching day with me, and you help the show reach more new listeners. Such a win-win. I also invite you to follow me on Instagram at mmakesmoney, and to jump into my free Telegram community, The Money Club, which is linked in the show notes. Until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes.